Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm here to begin another reading aloud series. This time I'll be reading from This Book Collecting Game by A. Edward Newton. And this is a book initially published in 1926. I have the October 1928 reprint here. And I'll be reading a chapter from this every other day until I finish, but I'm going to be doing it in tandem with Sean D. Standfast, who has his own channel. I'll link him in the section below. But he's not going to be reading this one. He's going to be reading The Amenities of Book Collecting, also by the same author, also by A. Edward Newton. And he is going to be starting on Saturday, so by the time I will have posted this, on Sunday he will have already started. So be sure to go over to his channel and check out his video about the first chapter of The Amenities of Book Collecting. So this one is called This Book Collecting Game, and it's published by Little Brown and Company, and it's got this fun cartoon in the frontispiece here. A. Edward Newton, the hobby writer, after an original watercolor by Gordon Ross. And so we have the gentleman in this red coat riding this rocking horse that seems to be made of a book right through this white picket fence, and the fox in the corner has the words near him that say "nothing daunts him." And I admit I don't quite understand what it means, but it is quite amusing to look at. So my copy has a dedication here. He says, to Audrey, Babette, Josephine, and Carolyn Newton, I dedicate this book to 4 sweet little girls, my cousins. Actually, my grandchildren, but thinking that cousins are more becoming to a man of my age and habit, we exchanged that name among us. And so there is a list of illustrations in here, quite a few, so those will be fun to look at as we move through here. And we have the crashing through frontispiece image sort of repeated in another format here with the chapter heading. So chapter 1 is called A Preliminary Canter. Book collecting. It's a great game. Anybody with ordinary intelligence can play it. There are indeed people who think that it takes no brains at all. Their opinion may be ignored. No great amount of money is required unless one becomes very ambitious. It can be played at home or abroad, alone or in company. It can even be played by correspondence. Everyone playing it can make his own rules and change them during the process of the game. It is not considered cricket to do this in other games. I have many times been asked what my rules are. The question is easily answered. I have limited myself to a few fine examples of illumination and printing and binding, and generally to the masterpieces of English literature in first editions. This last is a large order. I hitched my wagon to a star 50 years ago, but I did not get up to speed for 20 years. Many collectors have flown higher than I, but none have made a more modest beginning. I own today, and value highly, books which cost me 15 cents, and I well remember when the expenditure of $1 for a book seemed like an extravagance. When I owned a few hundred books, I referred to it largely as my library. Now that I have 8,000 or 10,000 volumes, I know that it is not a library, it is merely a collection of books. I cannot understand how people can get along without books. And useful as they are, I do not call a Sears Roebuck catalog and a telephone directory books. I am firmly convinced that most people do not know how to live. How should they, seeing that they march to the tune of "I don't know where I'm going, but I'm on my way"? The game of life is a good deal harder to play than is this book collecting game. A good rule is to read as much as one can, but if one must talk about something. Give the idiot who insists upon telling you how many miles he gets out of a gallon of gas, or the golfer who is forever going over a given course in 70, a wide berth. Someone has said that most friendships are mere confederacies in vice or leagues in folly. It is not so with us. We who play the noble game of authors know that the byproduct of book collecting is friends. Thomas J. Wise, the great English collector, has on his bookplate a motto which is characteristic of the man. Books bring me friends, where the earth I will be, solace or solitude, bonds of society. How many and how variously placed are the friends I have made through books. If variety is the spice of life, and it is, the incidents in the life of the book collector are many and various. You are fond of books, I see, says the visitor with a leer, as who would say, I know your guilty secret. I was brought up with books, and am just crazy about them. I wish you could see my copy of A Christmas Carol. I think it is a first edition. The illustrations are by Cruikshank. The illiterate always think that Cruikshank was Dickens' premier illustrator, and is bound in red morocco with a portrait of Dickens hand-painted on ivory let into the cover. Shoot that man into space, painlessly if you can, but shoot him. Cut your losses and let your profits ride, is good advice, even if it does come from a stockbroker. There are few finer or more innocent pleasures than talking books to one who knows. There may be joy in heaven, I am told there is, but the evidence is not conclusive, and I'll take mine here in my library. And one's mail is so interesting. I require the services of an able-bodied and nimble-minded young woman to enable me to cope with mine. Let me give an illustration. Some time ago, I received a letter at the top of which was an original drawing, which, reproduced, appears at the top of this article. It was such an exquisite little sketch, so full of humorous detail, that it was several minutes before I gave my attention to the writing underneath it. When I had decoded it, it was written in a most perplexing hand. This is what I read. My dear Mr. Newton, some months ago, Mr. E.R. Gee wrote to me that you wished my permission to use my portrait of Surtees in your forthcoming volume, The Greatest Book in the World. Mr. Gee, I believe, notified you of my cordial consent and added that I would be glad to prepare you a special plate suitable for monochrome reproduction. So, may I ask, in the kindliest manner possible, do you consider it entirely amenitous to borrow one's neighbor's things and use them without saying thank you? Yours for bigger and better amenities, Gordon Ross. I was amused and somewhat nettled and delighted. What had happened was this. In the preparation of my paper on sporting books, I had several times consulted E.R. Gee of New York, the well-known specialist on this fascinating subject. In the course of conversation with him one day, he informed me that he was about to publish a beautiful portrait of Robert Smith Surtees, the creator of the immortal Jack Jorrocks and Pig and Soapy Sponge and a host of others. The portrait was indeed a beauty, and wishing to be of service to my friend Gee, I told him that I would, if he wished, reproduce it in my paper on sporting books, my idea being to do Mr. Gee and the artist a good turn. I had at the time only just heard of the artist Gordon Ross, and in the pressure of publication and at the same time getting ready to go abroad, I quite overlooked my indebtedness to him as the artist of the portrait I had reproduced. Immediately I had turned over the manuscript and the illustrations of my book to my publisher. I sailed away on the foaming main in the biggest possible hurry. For dinner we'd lots of dry of champagne. And lots of other things, and I never gave Mr. Ross or Mr. Gee or their print another thought. But Mr. Ross is English, that is, Scotch, in a word, British, and a Briton will have his rights. The fact that Mr. Ross has lived and made a distinguished position for himself in New York is, in his judgment, no reason why I should, in his words, borrow his portrait without saying thank you, hence his letter. It has for many years been my habit, when in a tight place, to fess up. I wrote Ross and told him the truth, that in the hurry of preparation for my departure, it had quite escaped my mind that I should have secured his permission to reproduce his portrait of Surtees. I referred to the pleasure its possession gave one. Thank God I had bought and paid for one. And finally I told him that I was delighted that I had been so remiss as it had brought me the exquisite little drawing at the top of his his reprimand letter. Finally, I commissioned him to make another and a larger drawing in color of the same sketch, that I might frame it and hang it among my sporting pictures, and use a tiny reproduction of it as a book plate for my sporting books. In due course, I received another letter from Mr. Ross, also accompanied by another drawing, here reproduced. The letter read, "If I may borrow the literary style of the auctioneers, these highly esteemed prints are offered in pairs, and much more in token of complete forgiveness. Which of the little Ross sketches is the most amusing, the most exquisite? Let the reader decide. They are equally lovely to me, and no friendship is more enduring than one which begins with a little misunderstanding. Love there may be at first sight, but friendship grows more slowly. To return to books, I have no repugnances. Shaftesbury is not too genteel for me, nor Jonathan Wild too low. I collect Bibles and sporting books. I bless my stars for a taste so catholic, so unexcluding. And here we have Incognita, or Love and Duty Reconciled, a novel. And then we have Huckleberry Finn over here. Just at that moment, the novel interests me enormously. People have been collecting poetry and the drama for years, but the novel, the last and the most popular of the literary forms, has been neglected. Its turn will come. It is here now. A few days ago, I bought from Edgar Wells in New York a copy of Incognita, or Love and Duty Reconciled. A novel. This is perhaps the earliest instance of the word novel used in our sense on a title page of an English book. William Congreve wrote it, and when he was 21. It is very tiny and excessively rare. Dr. Johnson says he would rather praise than read it. Bless the doctor's honest heart. There were no frills about him. What he thought, he said. Speaking of novels, I have just read Huckleberry Finn for the first time. It is a great book. Galsworthy ranks it with Don Quixote, and rightly. If I don't live to see the first issue of the first edition of that book sell for $1,000, I shall die prematurely. Now, reader, don't for heaven's sake leap from your chair and, seizing pen, ink, and paper, offer me your copy of Huck Finn for half the money. I said the first issue of the first edition. The one bound in blue cloth. Yours probably is bound in green. The one in which page 283 is on a stub, and if you want to know why, ask your bookseller. He will tell you. I'm not teaching book collecting by correspondence. The sieve of my memory is coarsely meshed. Only a few important dates and facts are retained in it, and by the time your letter reaches me, I may have forgotten. Ask John T. Winterich. He will know. If I am not mistaken, he has written an article about it. I repeat, Huckleberry Finn is a great book. I take no merit for this discovery. And so that is the first chapter. And I should have mentioned, too, that these are republished essays or articles that he wrote. He says, in the Frontier, my thanks are due to the editors of the Atlantic Monthly, the Ladies' Home Journal, and the Saturday Evening Post for permission to reprint articles which have appeared in their publications, to the president and my fellow members of the Rowfant Club for permitting me to use the copy and illustrations appearing in the chapter on the format of the English novel, and to many friends for advice without which this book would be less worthy than it is. AEN. And so I'll be back on Tuesday with the next chapter / article in this book, which is called This Book Collecting Game. And be sure to go to Sean's channel for his video from yesterday and tomorrow's video, where he is reading The Amenities of Book Collecting, also by Newton.